memories of old, of what I used to know, and everything I was before. I'd hope to feel the grass.
Here pass rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, for all men pray in India. A land of breathtaking beauty, with its robed and turbaned populace moving against a background of alabaster archways. And I find myself walking through the romantic roadways leading the temples of the Hindus. Jealously watching their devout followers, the Hindu gods squat on their perches, on temple walls, in the shadow of their towers of learning. Brahma, who has seen civilization fall and new religions luring his devotees away, sits between his sacred cows, knowing that his position in the Hindu firmament is secure. Through the courtyard below, a never-ending line of Hindus come and go in strange worship and meditation. Not a square inch of this tower has escaped the chisels of the sculptors. Tier upon tier, in order of their rank, the gods stand, ever reaching higher toward the heavens. They are piously caricatured in every mood. Not only is every deity represented, but every one of their hatred, love, anger, passion, cupidity, all the expressions are there. Here is the only religion in which vice becomes a virtue. The very conduct of the gods themselves encourages depravity. The Sikh bull, Siva's favorite steed, venerated as the symbol of fertility, guards the entrance to the temple compound. His stone hide is plated with beaten gold. A huge war horse seems a part of some titanic merry-go-round. Symbolic of the very spirit of India, he champs at the bit of time, going nowhere. Stone elephants guard gateways to the inner shrines. I entered one where effigies of the gods are hidden. Gods with the heads of elephants, gods with heads of jackals and hyenas, gods with too many arms, gods with too many heads, gods with the faces of saints and devils. In a secret shrine, the 10-armed image of Kali was worshipped by members of her sect. A woman with drug-crazed eyes was seized by a priest and carried off to an inner court. Another woman comes to make the sacrifice of goat's blood and her own body to Kali. One swift stroke by the executioner and the animal's soul is claimed for the god, and the sacred blood is consumed while it is still hot with life. Monstrous gargoyles such as are seen only in the fevered dreams of an opium eater towered over me. I left the temple by a road haunted by the most awful living exhibit of wretchedness I had ever seen. The street of beggars and holy men. Everywhere in India, the eye is met by these so-called holy men. Life for him has been reduced to its simplest elements. The sun warms him, the few coppers he can beg in a day feed him, is the shadow of the temple. The presence of these holy men can be smelled as well as felt from a considerable distance. They shun water like the plague. Their talcum powder is the ashes of burnt corpses. Folded turban-wise on their heads are the beards of their ancestors. Even has changed this face from what once was a human countenance into what now appears to be a decaying cauliflower. I flung a silver rupee into the begging bowl of this mad exhibitionist. Look at his thumbnails, like corkscrews grown through his ears. That was his vow, and he kept it. This one never removes the ball of barbed wire from his face. That is his vow, and he keeps it. Quite as merciless to themselves is a sect of sun worshippers. This one has been looking steadfastly into the sun from the moment it rose over the horizon. It is now almost high noon, and he has blinked once. For days afterwards, he will be able to see nothing but the blazing orb of the sun. Eventually, these men all go totally blind. Begging is the only profession left open to widows. The children are borrowed or hired, for nothing opens a tourist's pocketbook as quickly as a half-starved infant. In every street is seen and heard this wailing chorus. The chant of the beggars is the real song of India. But here is one inhabitant of the land that never starves. Her ladyship, the sacred cow, being led by her proud and devoted guardian. Cows everywhere. They have the run of the streets and markets. They have the right of way everywhere. The low-caste Hindu walks carefully around the cow so that his shadow may not defile her sacred hide. It is their belief that the cow body contains the soul of some departed brother, meditating on the joys of the promised nirvana. She toils not, neither does she give milk, meat, or leather. A cow's life is more important than that of a human being. For in some parts of India, the killing of a cow, even by accident, is punishable by death. They eat wherever and whatever they can find. Millions of Hindus may sicken and die for sheer lack of nourishment. But in the temples of the Brahmins, there is always a pile of fodder and a bed of clean straw for the sacred cow. They wander at will in and out of the temples. When a Hindu feels death approaching, his last wish is to hold the tail of a cow. Thus, he believes he's nearer his desired reincarnation. The temple elephants rockly by. Surrounded on every side by poverty, hunger, and human misery, these favored beasts wear head coverings studded with diamonds, rubies, and other jewels. Their tusks are often banded with solid gold. Caste is the great social evil of India, and by his caste mark shall ye know the Hindu. This Brahmin has a phallic symbol painted on his forehead. He belongs to a race of priests who live off the fat of a lean lamb. Below the Brahmin are 2,300 divisions of caste, all with different beliefs and customs, which result in a jumbled confusion of the social system. Then, so low in the social scale that they have no caste at all, are the untouchables, and there are 60 million of them in India. These untouchables are avoided like the plague, lest their shadows defile their betters. Soulless one, he is cursed, kicked, and beaten from one corner of India to another. Important role in temple rites. For here, the affinity between religion and sex is important, and more than frank. In India, a woman is called an arable field, upon which any indignity may be exercised. The Hindu denies that a woman has a soul. Apart from her services to man, she serves no purpose on earth or in heaven. I sought a famous guru, a teacher. I asked him if there wasn't something I was missing, something of the inner meaning of all I had seen. You must forget the flesh and seek the spirit, he said. He consented to guide me out of into the light of true understanding. Lace made of stone. Something more than mere craftsmanship went into the carvings of these alabaster tapestries, and they conceal much that isn't privileged to the tourist's gaze. My guru and I entered in time to witness the preparations for a child marriage, still an everyday occurrence in India. The groom, the blushing bride, was scarcely finished with her dolls. The miracle of creation holds no mystery for these child mothers. Love, it's a strange word in their language. Whole colonies of children are left to shift elves and to attend unaided to the serious business of finding something to eat. Nowhere in all the preachments of the Hindu gods is the touching invitation, "Suffer little children to come unto me." Without the guru, I should never have been able to attend the celebration of Trimiri. This festival of horror takes place at the headwaters of a holy river, deep in the heart of the jungle. And we had to hurry to get there in time. We pushed ahead over an old trail which was a shortcut to the sacred river. Unseeing, I owned with a 20-foot python, whose camouflage was so perfect that he looked like part of the tree. A second more, and those coils would have gathered me into that embrace which means death. After that, I refused to go further without rest. I was utterly exhausted. I had to stop. All about me, the trees bore what seemed a loathsome fruit. Vampire bats. In the bright sunlight, they slept, hanging head downward and squeaking in their troubled sleep. Each of these repulsive things, the guru told me, contained the soul of a sinful man, pass a cycle of life as a bat before he could reach a higher incarnation. Sometimes these bats attain a weight of 5 pounds. Their wing spread is often as much as 4 feet. From a distance, we could see millions of these bats soaring upward from their jungle nests at twilight. Their flock careened upward. They resembled winged tornadoes, sending every living thing in their path to seek cover. Watching them, I wondered, was there enough blood in all Asia to satisfy the thirst of this myriad of bats? I was convinced that my guru was right. For if the souls of sinful men must find bodies, they've chosen those of creatures that are as ugly as sin itself. And if sinful souls must have a place to congregate, they could find no better spot than this, in the fastness of the South India jungle. At dawn the following day, we arrived at the Trimiri just as the elephant processional completed its circle of the holy shrine. There are 50 elephants in this mob, but when you've seen one of them, you've seen them all. The leading elephant has an apron for its trunk made of solid silver. Hindus prepare themselves for this ordeal by bathing in a sacred river. To drown in these muddy waters is a holy death, and there are many of these every year. The Trimiri is a season of self-torture. This man is having a silver skewer thrust through his tongue. See how he trembles. He's an artist. At last, he's finished. Some ashes, and he's led away screaming. No matter how cruelly their flesh is tortured, many of these fanatics do not seem to feel pain. The sound of the drums, the weird notes of the native flutes, all combine to both tortured and torturers into a religious ecstasy that does not allow a thought of self. Tiny children watch all this. They are amused. But it'll not be long before they too will be seized by the spirit of these horrible rites and give their bodies to be mangled by skewers, spikes, and iron hooks. I noticed one significant fact. No matter how many times their bodies are pierced, no matter how deeply out of the wound, science has long sought the explanation of this curious fact. Yes, there are strange things in the East, but the strangest of all is the sublime devotion of these poor creatures for their trinity of Hindu gods. This one is not ready for the torture. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Frequently, women are seized by an attack of religious ecstasy, which hurls them into movement. Devil dancers is the name given to these girls, for it's believed that a devil has possessed their souls. Day after day, night after night, the drums beat a frenzied tattoo until it becomes maddening. The torture continues. Another votary comes forward to have a silver spike thrust through his tongue for the higher glory of the destroying gods. They must be appeased by human suffering unto eternity. Some jab nails of various sizes into their bodies, tracing out grisly and intricate designs on their chests and backs. Every sense is shocked by the extent to which these deluded people will go. It made me ill and I wanted to leave, but the guru pointed out that there was time one of them invents a new and more horrible form of torture, there is always another who will go him one better. This holy pilgrim wants to show man and his gods alike that he can endure even more pain. He draws a heavy cart by means of this gruesome harness. Some of these fanatics make long pilgrimages, pulling their sacred burdens many, many miles. The day is drawing to a close, but there's no let-up in the religious fervor of the Trimiri. Even by night, the celebration continues. The jungle is their temple, the tortures are their altar candles. And in the blackness of night, there are tortures for there are no words. This goes on hour after hour, and the last one is no less hectic than the first. At the end of the Trimiri, the weary pilgrims disband and march back to their villages. The festival is over, but many want one last dip into the waters of the sacred river, the stream in which are the bodies of both men and animals. And the river seems to surge more swiftly to the sea, so that it can purge itself of its burden of corruption. Kipling was right, for east is east, and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. Benares, the sacred city on the crest shore of the holy Ganges River. I floated slowly up and down alone. Guru had been taken ill on the long journey back to the Festival of Horrors. The Hindu Buddhist, this spot has the same meaning as Jerusalem has for the Christian and the Jew. 47 stone ghats, each dedicated to a different god, extend for several miles above and below the places where countless pilgrims, some well and strong, others sick and dying, journey thousands in never-ending waves in the filthy but purifying water of Mother Ganges, as they lovingly call the river. Many chill themselves into death. They come here with the actual purpose of dying, for death here is preferable to life elsewhere. For Benares, they believe, is 60 feet nearer to heaven than any other spot on earth. Yet there's never contagion or epidemic, though they violate every rule of health and sanitation. But that doesn't matter, says the devout Hindu, for nothing can defile Mother Ganges, no matter how foul. She purifies both sin and disease instantly and utterly. Slowly, the knowledge came to me that to these sincere believers, this river is a great cathedral. These stone steps are their roots. I realize now that the washing of this cool water against their fevered skins is to them more beautiful than any heavenly choir. The water must be dipped in a certain manner and allowed to trickle through the fingers before drinking. Certain prayers must be said at the same time. And nowhere on earth is there a river which so completely justifies the worship and devotion of a people. I began to believe that the dirtier a thing is, the holier it becomes in India. Here are seen many vivid demonstrations of the power of mind over matter. Yet, there is here some mysterious force, so mighty and powerful that it actually heals. The sight of these people bathing and drinking in this scum-covered water, amid seeping sewage and the charred portions of bodies which float down from the burning ghats, left me in a jumble of confusion. So I rowed my boat shoreward to try and remove the impression from my mind in the picturesque streets of the merchants. I came to the shops and the bazaars occupied by workers in gold, silver, and brass. Thousands of beautiful objects are made here by hand in the most exquisite designs. Damascene, silver and gold inlay, is done by a secret process handed down from father to son. It was while here that I learned of a tragedy which affected me deeply. The old guru, who had been my constant companion since the day I engaged him, through whose kindly understanding I had learned so much of these people and their gods, was dead. The messenger quickly led me to the spot where the last rites for my guru were being held. The burning ghat on the Ganges. It is the daily prayer of 100 million human beings that they be burned on this very spot. I saw the ghastly smoke of several corpses rising slowly into the air. Other bodies wrapped in winding sheets of gauze awaited their turn in the destroying flames. This untouchable belongs to a family who for 6 generations have... Behind him is the well where lepers bathe and where the water is changed but once a year. A sickly pall of smoke hung over the entire gap. One poignant thought came to my mind. The cheapest things in India are the lives of human beings. When I came to the place where my dead friend was to be cremated, he had already been given his last bath in the Ganges. Without that, the hands of untouchables who must care for him now would convey impurity. His nearest relative must sprinkle him with palm oil to hasten the action of the flames. In this climate, mortal remains must be disposed of at once. A man dies, an hour later he is ashes. As I gazed upon the rigid countenance of my guru, I wondered into what reincarnation his kindly soul had passed. Was he nearer that nirvana which all true Hindus desire to attain? The slightest sign of emotion, she touched the sacred fire to the guru's throat. I knew nothing of the dead man's family, for he had never spoken of them. Was she, this young girl, the guru's daughter? Or was she his wife? If she was, I didn't want to know, for the fate of the Hindu widow is a sad one. She can never marry again. She must spend the rest of her existence in mourning for her lord and master. She must go through life as the slave of her dead husband's relatives. It is only a short time since Hindu wives committed suti, hurled themselves into the cremation fire of their husbands. Though suti is now forbidden by law, it sometimes happens. No wonder these little wives would rather die than face the miserable lives that await them. The flames leaped viciously upward, enveloping, consuming. An untouchable used a long pole to make it burn faster. Behind me, I could hear the chant of other funeral processions. Life, existence, love, death. What does it all matter? You are never so dead as when you die in India. This was all earthly that was left of my guru. An earthen jar, a few poor ashes, and Mother Ganges performs the final rite herself, takes back to her bosom the remains of her son, and Hindus bathe and pray and drink. So life passes on in India. The Vale of Kashmir is a place of fairy-like loveliness. Kashmir. There is magic even in the name. To me, this is the most beautiful spot in all India. Here is one of the far-flung valleys of the world which has always called to me in my hours of dreams. It is here in the principal city, Srinagar, that the Maharaja has his summer palace. Srinagar is often referred to as the Venice of India on account of its many beautiful waterways. Many Indian families live and carry on their entire existence on the water in great houseboats like this. It's a great life. When you get tired of living in one spot, you simply untie the boat and move. Some of these boats are floating hotels. Here in Kashmir is a spot famed in the poems and songs of every people who have a written language. Shalimar Garden. This incomparable garden was built by a great Mughal emperor for his beloved wife. Here was one Oriental whose regard for woman transcends that of all his fellow Indians. Who indeed does not know the Kashmiri song, based upon the poem of Lawrence Hope? This is the spot which inspired that undying melody. Strange how so many of the loveliest things in the world have been made by some man for some woman. Shalimar, strange, exotic, lovely, passionate, puts you in that ecstatic frame of mind. And in the grove of China trees which bordered Shalimar, I met a lovely little Kashmiri maiden. Perhaps she was lonely, just as I was. Perhaps she was merely curious. At any rate, she was probably as flattered by the attention of a white man as I was by the beauty in her big brown eyes. She wanted to walk toward home, but I had a better idea. I told her I wanted to look at birds and butterflies, and as she couldn't understand me, she believed me. If you must go to Delhi, my friends warned me, wait until the Ramadan is over. It'll be safer then. So, I went to Delhi. I arrived there on the first day of Ramadan, the holy fast of a month. During this long holiday, the Mohammedan touches no food between dawn and dark. The bazaars are crowded. This season corresponds to our own religious holidays. Mohammedans have come here from all over India, for Delhi is the greatest Muslim religious center of the country. I wanted to see the spectacle of Ramadan, not as a white man, but from the Muslim viewpoint. There was but one way to do this. I disguised myself as a Mohammedan. I passed through streets that were rapidly emptying. Ramadan was about to begin. All roads led to the great mosque. For fear of being recognized as an infidel, I dared not go through the great gate, but sought the darker passages through a labyrinth of dim corridors. I dared not wash in the pool as the others were doing. In the first place, it wasn't any too clean. Besides, I was afraid the water might remove the stain with which I covered my face and hands. I found another passage and noted it carefully, in case I should have to get away in a hurry. This led me through a vaulted corridor into another part of the court, where I thought I would be safer because it was less crowded. The great mosque at Delhi is one of the most majestic and beautiful temples in the world. It was built by Shah Jahan, who knew and loved beauty. Red sandstone and black and white marble offer odd contrasts. The faithful had unfurled their prayer rugs and ranged themselves in long rows for the first prayer. They waited only the call of the muezzin on the high balcony of the minaret. Then came his cry, loud and clear as a bell. 20,000 bodies bowed as one. 20,000 foreheads touched the hot stones of the courtyard. 20,000 people murmured the reply to the muezzin and rose to their feet. 20,000 souls acknowledged the majesty of Allah and the power of his prophet. It was indescribably impressive. I'm not of a particularly religious bent of mind, but the sight of that great spectacle thrilled me. The wish to be nearer God, the desire to worship him, the countless prayers of all these people were rising in a mighty symphony. It filled me with a deep and reverent feeling that I shall never forget. Allah be praised. Allah is the one God, and Muhammad is his prophet. That was their simple, understandable creed. I knew if they caught me, I hadn't a chance. Paradise is promised to the Muslim who kills an infidel who has committed sacrilege, and I was guilty. The driver was a Buddhist and helped me get away. Thus, I left the mosque by the back door. Later that evening, I discovered that New York and Paris haven't a monopoly on nightclubs. The cafe I visited had a floor show that wouldn't have looked out of place in any musical comedy. I could almost believe that I was back on Broadway, or that the entire ensemble of the Follies had been imported here. That idea was only shattered when I saw the picture of this all-night resort. The place catered to every race and type which makes up the polyglot population of an Indian city. They shouted encouragement to the dancers and flung coins to the musicians. The dances performed by these girls are adapted from the temple dances of the Devi Davas, girls of pleasure as they are called. Beginning with a slow rhythm, they reached a climax in a flashing whirl of speed which left the observer dizzy. The girls then mingled with the patrons at the tables. I noticed nearby several young Englishmen and their beautiful companions. Their language seemed to be perfect, but they didn't appear to be English girls. I asked my host, a wealthy young Hindu, about them. He said that the girls were half-castes, Eurasians, the living result of what happens when a love affair occurs between a Hindu woman and a white man. Most of the dancers were Eurasians also. That same white man who sheds tears over the plight of Madame Butterfly ruthlessly deserts a Eurasian girl and he turns his back on India and sails for home. What becomes of the girls? They go on with this life, while youth lasts, in the vain hope that they may sometime marry a white man. It was while here that my Indian friend asked me if I would enjoy going on a lion hunt. I thought he was joking, as I had never heard of lions in India. But he assured me he was in earnest. Lions still exist in considerable numbers in the Gir forest. They are royal game and jealously guarded, but an attempt was to be made to capture an Indian lion for the private zoo of a wealthy Raja. The nightclub was still going in full swing when we left. I didn't even stop for equipment, as I was told there would be plenty at our destination. Next day, we traveled to the Raja's hunting lodge by elephant. The Raja had a stable of these royal beasts, perfectly trained and groomed. My friend told me of an ancient proverb which typifies India. The poor have no friends, but the elephant waits at the rich man's door. I was exceedingly thrilled, for the lion hunt was to take place on elephants. This beast we were riding would be the one we would use in the hunt. And the unusual spectacle I was about to witness was to be one I would never forget. The people who were to be our beaters in the hunt were religious thieves. They are born criminals and so recorded in state police records at birth. As India has more gods than any other country, she also has more criminals. There are 15 million of them in India. They call themselves crows and hope to return to earth after death in the form of crows. They worship that bird of ill omen because they consider him a clever thief. Wickedness is their only creed in religion. The crow must do his evil deed each day. There is only one sin in the eyes of the crow, that of getting caught in the act of crime. In that case, the crow can only atone by getting drunk. The more he beats his wife, the better his chance of absolution. Then if a kind stranger picks you up, feel around until you pocketbook. And from what was a place of poverty, they brought out their ill-gotten treasure. Even their Rajas are bound by the laws of theft and must steal from one another at least once a year. Otherwise, they will lose caste, and a new Raja will be chosen. For standards, the crows love sport and will drop everything to be in on a hunt. They recklessly risk their lives for mere love of the game and will stop at nothing to drive a man-killer out of ambush. The following morning, we gathered in the jungle at the edge of the Gir forest. The Raja had provided royally for all his guests in the way of hunting elephants and equipment. He had given orders that no lion was to be shot except in case of danger to human life. Our object was merely to drive one into a place where it could be captured by the beast. As the capture of an Indian lion is a rare event, sportsmen from all over, many of them were skeptical about our chances, for like myself, they had never seen a lion Indian species. Besides the 58 elephants belonging to the Raja, many hunting elephants had been brought from neighboring provinces by princes and potentates who wanted to eat they were accustomed. Stretching out in a long line, the trained beasts gradually formed a great circle 4 miles in diameter. Then, reinforced by the crow beat shouting and using all sorts of noise-making devices, they started slowly toward a common center. The purpose of the great circle was to drive animals into a dry riverbed which had formed a natural depression where it would be possible to capture a lion alive. It was interesting to watch the sagacious animals as they picked their way where the footing was dangerous. They broke down trees and pushed away underbrush to make travel as easy as possible for their riders. We progressed slowly because of the jungle grass, which was so high that animals could sneak into cover unseen. Even if we had not been instructed not to shoot, it would have been difficult to hit an animal in such obstructed terrain. Now the great circle of men and beasts had narrowed into a comparatively small area, in the center of which was the big pit. I had the mahout drive my elephant up to a spot from whence I could see inside the depression. Luck was with us. His Majesty, the King of Beasts, over 1/4 of a ton of fierce fighting machinery. For the Indian lion's nothing that lives, he never attacks man unless driven to desperation. The striped killer, the lion's only rival for the jungle. He too had been caught in the circle. Both champions of their kind, evenly matched in size and weight in an arena which was a natural setting. The tiger's unexpected attack had taken the lion by surprise, but His Majesty's fury was roused. Only death could stop him now. The tiger seemed to realize this and tried to escape. Then they met in a death struggle in midair. Would have to be made on the backs of hardy ox-like animals called yaks. A yak train was just getting ready to leave. Here, travelers must band together for mutual protection against the groups of robber monks who frequent the mountain passes. The yak is controlled by a rope through his nose, and the nose of a yak has all the stretching qualities of India rubber. While waiting for my caravan, I saw a demonstration of falconry, which is practiced extensively by these people. This so-called falcon is in reality a trained golden eagle. The usual prey of these birds are hares and hill partridges, but some of them have been trained to fly at ibex and small mountain goats. To demonstrate the ability of his bird, this Tibetan pulled off the hood and flew him at a chikon, a bird resembling our pigeon. Like a well-trained hunting dog, the falcon brings his quarry to the feet of his master, thus adding variety to the menu of the Tibetan family. Birds are, of course, highly valued by their owners. Our journey eastward began over the most desolate country in Asia. No wonder the people of Tibet are poverty-stricken, as there is so little land that can be cultivated or made to grow anything. But the Tibetans have at least one great blessing in their herds of yaks. The cows give a rich milk. Yak skin gives them leather and tents. The woolly hides make them warm clothing. Best of all, the yak takes the Tibetan where he wants to go and gets him safely back again. As the snow got deeper, there was no vegetation except bunches of coarse grass, which the horses refused to eat, though the yaks pawed it out and ate it with relish. Up we went into the clouds. My heart pounded like a trip hammer. I thought my chest would burst. My head rang with unearthly music. For I certainly was, at this height, nearer the angels than I had ever been before or since. 19,000 feet above sea level, where there is neither animal nor bird nor tree, And still we climbed. At the summit of the pass, the trail was lost under deep snow. There was nothing for us to do but let the yaks guide themselves. We prayed they would not drop us suddenly into some snow-filled canyon. I could hear the Tibetans behind me muttering their O Mani Padme Hums. They believe all storms are caused by the god Mogam, who claims the souls of travelers who perish in the snow. But once over the highest pass, there was a distinct change in the weather. One moment we were in a bitter 70-mile blizzard, and a half hour later we were in sight of a pleasant rolling plain, offering a promise of comparative warmth and comfort. It was here we hoped to find a respite from the rigors of the past few weeks. But this happy anticipation was swiftly and rudely shattered. Just as we reached the plain, we were set upon by a group of hard-riding, wild-looking bandits. In less time than I can tell it, I was seized. My baggage was completely ransacked. I was tied up and brought to a small village of yak-skin tents called yurts. That the bandits were little better than savages was evident from the beginning. For a poor mongrel dog, which had attached itself to our party, was cruelly shot for no reason at all, just before we entered the yurt. But they gave me nothing to eat or drink. My cigarettes they evidently considered the most highly prized loot they had taken from me. They enjoyed them hugely. A group of the curious would appear at the door of the yurt and peer in, as though anxious to be looking on when I finally begged for mercy. I heard hoofbeats and voices outside. My predicament inside the yurt was interrupted by the entrance of an old friend. It was the old Buddhist Lama whom I had met in Darjeeling 5 years before. He spoke rapidly in English, which the others could not understand. All my belongings were immediately returned to me, and we were soon trekking eastward again. A few hours later, we passed under a mountain and through a long tunnel grooved out of solid rock by the action of some prehistoric river. The Lama said we were now in the Forbidden Valley. Soon I should see the glory of Asia, the monastery of Ram Galong. He told me there was but one other way out of the valley, northward, over the Penang Glacier into the Gobi Desert, an almost impossible journey. This secret entrance to the valley had been prepared by nature. The Lama told me to look back. I saw a curious rock formation above the tunnel entrance. See, said the Lama, if those 3 keystones were released, it would close this entrance forever. I shuddered as I realized what would happen. It would free millions of tons of granite. The whole side of the great mountain above us would be tossed into the very spot where we were now standing. And now, as we came around the base of the mountain, I saw a sight I shall never forget. The lamasery of Ram Galong, called by the Tibetans the Bride of Buddha. It was the symbol of a strange faith whose disciples worship a living God of their own creation. Some terrible cataclysm of nature had thrown up the volcanic rock from which Ram Galong reared its mighty head, straight up 1,000 feet above the floor of the valley which surrounded it. As protection against Mogam stood these 3 Chortens, holding the crushed bones of the last 3 lamas who had ruled Ram Galong. It all seemed like the fulfillment of some fantastic dream. This was a weird creation of an unknown people in a terrible wilderness. There was a story of struggle and blood in every massive stone which had been carried up those heights by the puny hands of men. We toiled wearily up the road which led to its summit. O Mani Padme Hum, the jewel in the heart of the lotus. Could that curious phrase have anything to do with the creation of a living God? Could it mean the sacred virgin whom I had come so far to see? I was burning with curiosity to see her. What would she be like? Would she be ignorant, dirty, uncouth, like the Tibetans among whom she had been raised? Now, in the outer courtyard at the summit, our animals were being unloaded. Many other pilgrims were plodding up the pass below us. I found out why. The Lama told me that the festival of conception, Manlam, as it was called, was to take place at once. But first, the ceremony of driving out of devils would take place. That would give us a little time. A number of monks were watching me with narrowed, pig-like eyes. Then I saw her standing on a balcony. She was bronze, boy-like, her figure concealed in monk-like robes. Just a momentary glimpse, for the priests were watching me with cold suspicion. But even in those ugly garments, I could tell that she belonged to my race. The Lama was talking with a group of monks. He was evidently giving them some kind of explanation of my presence. As I approached, they greeted me with forced civility. I turned for one more look at the girl. The Lama, evidently not wanting us to meet under the watchful eyes of the monks, took her inside. I wondered what he would tell her. When I was shown to my quarters, despite my fatigue, I could not sleep. I kept thinking of the girl and the terrible fate in store for her. These great horns have been calling for days. In the courtyard, fantastic costumes and gigantic masks are being brought out. They have been a year in the making by fanatic monks, inspired by a lifetime of devil driving. Here is the effigy of the dead god of Ramgalong. Parts of his body are mummified human remains. He is supposed to be the actual father of the living God created by the festival of conception. Monks prepare for this so-called miracle by rigorous training called longam. It is a secret which enables them to dance for incredible lengths of time without stopping for food or rest. It is possible that some drug is used in this training, for as days go by, their bodily energy increases and they show no signs of fatigue. Their ideas of demons portrayed by the masks show much imagination and real artistry. Every mask represents a demon who symbolizes some sin. Masks are also used to conceal the real identity of the father of the unborn God. 17 miles over the valley, and are then relayed 100 miles across the Himalayas, telling that the festival of conception will soon begin. Pilgrims are arriving from all directions in many kinds of conveyances to take part in the celebration. They are laden with presents with which they hope to secure the favors of the living God to be created. Superstition is so strong that the pilgrims will give everything they possess if the lamas demand it. Even the poor shepherds give it, driving them across mountains and fording icy streams to be present at Monlam. For days they have been arriving thus. But when they leave, most of them will be empty-handed, and the priests will be rich. The plains, the hidden canyons, the very mountaintops, all contribute to this endless stream of humanity which pours into Ramgalong to witness this weird shamanistic ritual. The actual ceremony is begun by a sub-lama. As with all primitive peoples, rhythm plays an important part in arousing the religious emotion. With gong and cymbal, he begins a soft, insistent beat, at the same time reading from the holy manuscripts, which are so ancient they have fallen apart from usage. In accompaniment to this, the prayer wheels are turned. Thousands of Om Mani Padme Hums rise to Buddha. Countless prayer beads are clicked, checking off the sins of transgressors against the laws of Buddha. The wind and water wheels are kept in unceasing motion. All this to the increasing cadence of the clanging of cymbal and the beating of bronze. On the filthy floors of atonement chambers, monks and pilgrims confess their sins, competing with one another in recitals of wickedness. Slowly the rhythm increases in sound and tempo. The skeleton dancers, disciples of Longam, have been keeping this up for 5 days without apparent sustenance of any kind, a constant reminder to the Tibetan of the sureness of death. The lamas begin to assume a fixed stare, as though under the influence of self-hypnosis. The dancers, too, are beginning to increase the speed of their grotesque gyrations. It was evident in every sight and sound that all this was driving definitely towards some sort of emotional climax. As I watched the spectacle, my curiosity became more strained, for I was the only white man to have ever witnessed this entire ceremony. The entire courtyard was now in a turmoil. Spectators and dancers seemed to be in an excited state of mind. The idea behind all this had a terrific, impelling power. The creation of a living God happens only once in a generation. It is the greatest event that ever happens in Tibet. Excited myself, I climbed to a spot where I could see to better advantage. I had seen little of the old Lama since I had been here, but now I caught sight of him. He seemed to be in a violent argument with some monks. Were they talking about me or about the white girl? Whatever it was, they seemed to dominate the Lama, and he finally gave in and left them. Now it was easy for me to understand how these dancing monks held such control over the people. They worked themselves into a mad frenzy as they performed their unbelievable antics and contortions. The masks they wore seemed to be real faces. I could see what a tremendous impression they were making on the watchers, and I felt the uncanny influence myself. I was watching for a glimpse of the white girl, but in such a crowd it seemed hopeless. Now I was interrupted by the Lama. He told me that against his will he was being forced to proceed with the ceremony, but if the worst happened, he had a plan to prevent it. He told me to go at once to the other side of the valley where horses were waiting, on which the girl and I would escape over the great Penang Glacier into the Gobi Desert. From the chanting hall came a sudden burst of music, a change in tempo. I saw now that the Lama was virtually a prisoner, as some monks came for him and led him away toward the chanting hall. There was nothing I could do. I started for my cell. Malignant human eyes seemed to glare up at me from behind the mask of the demon monk as he danced devilishly below. I had told my bearer to take my things to the other side of the valley where the ponies were waiting. The chanting hall was filled with monks, now all singing their Omani Padme hums in a crazy crescendo. The old Lama, now merely an effigy of power, stood on the raised altar. The image of Mogum glared down as though in triumph. I made up my mind. I was going to see what happened. O Mani Padme Hum. Hundreds of voices raised in that prayer, but it was no longer a prayer. It was a horrible incantation. I could see something being moved through the crowd. It was an enormous palanquin borne on the shoulders of several sub-lamas. I could not see what was inside, but whatever it was, I must know. I looked for a spot where I could watch unseen. Voices were raised in religious exultation. The meaning of this tremendous rhythm of spectacle and sound became suddenly clear, for I could see inside the palanquin. It was she, the white girl. To the sound of a great chorus of Omani Padme Hums, she was carried down the aisle and toward the altar, where stood the old Lama, his face a mask, his body a frozen statue. He was helpless, so was I. Could nothing be done to avert the power of the priests, the terrible procedure of the shamanistic sacrifice? This was the ceremony of purification, and if the gods in the person of the Lama gave the right sign, she would be given to these loathsome Lamas who would possess the jewel in the heart of the lotus. She would be the bride of Buddha. With a feeling of terrible helplessness, I stood riveted to the spot and watched her. The scene was one of eerie suggestiveness as she approached the altar. The Lama raised his hands. His gesture was one of anger and denial. The monks glared at him. Was he refusing to give the right signs? I heard the voices of the monks, their Omanis, changing to a volume of fury. Then something happened. With a great roar, the mountain began to move. The Lamasery began to slide. 1,000,000 tons of rock crashed down into the valley where I was supposed to be, and Ram Galong was a ruin. I thought the girl and the Lama must have been killed. How I reached the horses in the great Penang Glacier will always be a mystery to me. Somehow I found myself riding with the Lama over the mountains of jagged ice. But our troubles were not over yet. The foothold for man and beast was treacherous and dangerous. Horses and mules had to be dragged over awful crevasses by main strength. One of my pack ponies had become footsore. His hock worn and cut by frozen splinters. He slipped. I made every effort to save him. He made a gallant effort to save himself. Then his lead rope broke. I was discouraged and despondent. I almost wished it had been me instead of the brave beast. But finally, we reached comparatively easy going, and the Lama told me about the girl. She was safe, and he had tried to persuade her to escape with us, but she refused. The Tibetans were her people, she said, and the only friends she had ever known. Their religion was her religion. And if it was the will of Buddha that she become the mother of a living God, then she considered it her duty to bow to that command. She would stay at Ramgala. And after showing me the way out over the Gobi Desert, the Lama intended to return to help her, while I went on toward the nearest seaport and home.
Through the streets of old, of what I used to know, and everything I was before. I'd hoped to feel the grass, the garden of my